A brief synopsis from the last video on what phenomenology is. It is not a philosophical school, but a basic understanding of how to practice philosophy. And you can only practice philosophy by addressing the phenomena. What is a phenomenon? A phenomenon is an object for someone. Something is how it becomes conscious. Meaning something as it is experienced or perceived by someone. Phenomena cannot be measured with a measuring instrument or the like. You can't measure whether you have back pain or how an object appears to you. Phenomenon and appearance differ in that an appearance requires an enigmatic nature so that it has something that the appearance requires. Whereas with the phenomenon this is not the case, that phenomenon is therefore the real thing. Why are phenomena discussed? Because one thinks that this is the only way to gain reliable knowledge, because the phenomena cannot deceive, have no background. If you have back pain, you don't go to the doctor and ask if you really have back pain. You know you have back pain because you experience it. For this reason, phenomenology is always practiced in the first-person perspective. In the Anglo-Saxon sphere, phenomenology is understood as simply speaking from the first-person perspective, but this is a misunderstanding, since one must not only practice phenomenology from the first-person perspective, but also use the phenomenological methods to do necessary to analyze structures and features from the phenomena, otherwise it would only be a phenomenography. By external perception, Husserl means simply the object perception of material things, such as a book or a pen. And that perception, according to Husserl, is a show-off, pretending to be something it isn't. I also call it the wannabe structure. Then Husserl argues that a contradiction is part of their essence. It just means that to pretend it can do something that it can't is a contradiction in perception. This applies not only to individual perception, but to perception in general. A snake, alien or human, has this wannabe structure in their perception. And one recognizes this by observing how the objective sense presents itself as a unit in the infinite variety of possible appearances. Grab an object of your choice and look at it, but no pictures, because image perception is something of its own, for which I will also create a video. But now back to the actual topic of today's video. Namely a practical example, the phenomenology of object perception by Edmund Husserl. Husserl says, external perception is a constant pretense to accomplish something that it is incapable of accomplishing in its own nature. For example, when I look at a book, it presents itself in infinitely many different ways, which means I can move it. I can see the object from different perspectives. The front side looks different to me than the left side of the book, but it's the same book and not two different books. That means we have the structure of thing and appearance in the phenomenon. So, it is not the phenomenon that is interpreted as appearance, but the thing and an appearance are in the phenomenon. Husserl calls this thing a full thing. An object is a full thing, and it remains as a unit in the multiplicity of its appearances. If I look at the book from 50 different perspectives, I have seen one book and not 50 books. And this apparent contradiction, according to Husserl, can be resolved by paying close attention to it. Hence this wannabe structure. When I see the front side of the book, the front side pretends to be the full thing. Furthermore, Husserl says, what we first notice is that the aspect of perspective shadowing, in which every spatial object inevitably appears, only ever makes it appear on one side. So, when we see an object, the object pretends to be the full thing, even though we only see one side. This is completely independent of whether you are Mexican, a rabbit or a god. No matter how perfectly we perceive a thing, it never fails in the all-round nature of the peculiarities that belong to it and make it up to the senses in the perception. In the last video I said that phenomenology sees itself as the mathematics of consciousness. Just as every triangle has an interior angle sum of 180 degrees, a seeing being can never experience all-roundness, one always sees only one side. This knowledge is neither inductive nor deductive. Like mathematical knowledge, it is not a mere fact. As a fact it would mean that it could be otherwise. But it cannot be otherwise that you do not see all sides at the same time. Likewise, it is not a fact that the interior angles of a triangle always add up to 180 degrees. These are absolute truths because it could not be otherwise. An external perception is unthinkable. That means it's about describing a perception as I experience it myself in order to discover something about it that cannot be thought of otherwise. Taking the book as an example, it would be a fact that the book is yellow, for example. But it could also be different, it could be blue. And Husserl is looking for what is not fact but logically necessary. It is inconceivable that you see the book from one perspective, that it has a different color or different shape. This insight is not a scientific insight, but an insight from consciousness, a phenomenological insight. But it doesn't stop there. Husserl also analyzed the relationship between the sides seen and the sides not seen. As we remember, viewed side has a wannabe structure. Husserl goes on to say, this fundamental distinction between what is actually perceived and what is actually not perceived is part of the primal essence of the correlation between external perception and physical object. The back of the book is actually not noticed. The back is unsighted. In German, a distinction is made between invisible and unsighted. Invisible means that something cannot be seen. Unsighted means that it is not seen. Daniel Day-Lewis is unsighted to me because I don't see him, because he's somewhere else. If he were invisible, I couldn't see him, even if he were standing in front of me. Back to the book. The backside is unsighted because there is a possibility to see the backside. According to Husserl, this is a strange disposition because the perceived object belongs to the own sense of every perception as its objective sense, the book that is seen. But this full thing is not what is actually seen now, one actually only sees the front side. Husserl says consciousness of an object is not consciousness of one side, our consciousness is consciousness of a full thing with the consciousness that we perceive one side. The moment you think you perceive a side, I am already aware that it is a side of a full thing, otherwise I would not think of perceiving only a given side. Perception, generally speaking, is original consciousness, that means we see the thing ourselves, we don't mean when we see a front side, maybe it has a back side. We know it has a back because it is logically necessary. Of course, we don't know exactly what the back side looks like, whether the back side of the book contains a picture of the author or something. In the external perception we have this dichotomy that the original consciousness is only possible in the form of a really and actually original consciousness of sides and a co-consciousness of other sides that are not there originally. You see the front side of a book and have an awareness of the other sides of the book without seeing them. These conscientious sides are unsighted. Husserl doesn't think that we know from our memories either. Even if we have never seen an object and are seeing it for the first time, we know that there are different sides to it. We make the unsighted sides visible by moving around the object or by moving the object itself. So, Husserl has the opinion that in order to analyze it phenomenologically, if we are able to perceive it, we have to move the object or move ourselves around the object. A blind person, for example, could not. It is clear that what characterizes the sight actually seen as a mere side and makes it not taken as the thing, but something beyond it is consciously perceived as perceived, of which just that is really seen, in one vague pointing out or indexing exists. This means that when we see a side, we are aware that there are multiple sides. The perceived object is a system of references, argues Husserl. That means that the viewed side refers to or indicates that there are several sides to explore. Husserl is convinced that the thing calls the subject and says take a closer look at me, turn me. There's kind of an attraction. Heidegger called this call structure. There are not only individual indications, but entire systems of indications, systems of rays of indications, which point to corresponding diverse systems of appearance. They are pointers to a void. I see the front side of my book, and that front side is a pointer into a void. So, it points to the unsighted sides. It is an emptiness that is not nothing, since it links to unsighted sides. Husserl cannot avoid developing his own terminology from here, which has become very famous and has been adopted by many philosophers. Husserl describes the emptiness of the back as a horizon. He says horizon because you can't go to the horizon. It's like chasing the setting sun, the horizon shifts every time, so you never reach it. As a result, this horizon can never be filled. The object has a horizon and is surrounded by a halo of apparent emptiness. With halo, a term from astronomy, Husserl means a kind of aura that exists at the outermost edges of objects. It can best be described on a solar eclipse, where you can see the rays around the moon like a aura. According to Husserl, the horizon cannot be filled out arbitrarily. That means we know the backside of the book doesn't look like a bathtub, for example. You can already feel what the back looks like. In order to see more precisely what a reverse side looks like, that is to fill the empty horizon, in Husserl's words, we have to go around the object. This can be compared to filling a water bottle. When filling the bottle, we know what shape the water takes, namely that of the bottle. But at the same time, the horizon is also being emptied as it shifts. When I look at the back side of the book, what used to be the front side becomes the back side, and thus the horizon. This halo of consciousness, despite its emptiness, has its meaning in the form of a, you could say, omen. We have an awareness of a reverse side in the form of an omen. With every perception phase of streaming perception, with every new appearance, the same thing always applies, only that the intentional horizon has changed. Flowing perception means that one has to move or move the object of perception. Object perception without movement is not object perception, but an invented construct, because there is always movement, whether it is the object that moves, the body or just the eyes. Husserl further distinguishes the approaching side of the object when walking around and the outgoing side. The horizon that is just being filled, meaning the side towards which one is approaching, is what Husserl calls pretension. Husserl calls the side that is departed from, and thus created the new horizon, retention. Husserl also described retention as a comet's tail, it is in the fresh memory. These are the temporal dimensions. Pretension facing forward and retention facing backward on the timeline. It is particularly easy to understand in relation to music. The piece you just heard was a melody. You don't think you just heard 200 tones, but a melody. That's because you're hearing a full thing, because the past sound that was created is still in retention, it's still lingering, it's in consciousness. And only because there is a coming omen, we can tell if someone is playing the piano wrong or can make a mistake. When listening to music, you know what kind of tones are coming, even if you don't know exactly which tones are coming. Briefly summarized again. Husserl makes a chronological division, pretension and retention. The horizon coming in time is the pretension. The horizon that is past in time is the retention. Then there is the spatial division of the object horizon, which Husserl calls the outer and inner horizon. The front of a book points to other sides and that is the horizon. But you can also look more closely at the front and possibly perceive new things such as a book title, this is the inner horizon. Movement is not necessary for this. You just have to focus more closely on the side you are seeing. This is phenomenology in practice. It describes how something must be conscious in order for it to be conscious at all. But that was not all, just a first part. Another part will be uploaded soon, which will conclude Husserl's phenomenology of object perception.